Fortunately, she will have the microphone. But let me just say, first of all, this is Dr. Jodi Hayashida. She has done a lot of work in the area of the white Christian nationalism, sort of studying it. And the reason this is really important is because what we see happening in our government with the famous 2025 program is unfolding basically what white Christian nationalism would like to impose on our democracy. So I think it's important to understand just how we need to be able to pick apart the parts that don't make sense and basically take a stand together. So thank you very much for coming, and I will turn it over to Jodi.
Pardon me just a sec. I was going to try and add a handheld mic.
This is embodying together gay white Christian nationalism. It's a strong way to start. Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
No. Oh, come on. Okay, let me make sure it's on. Nope. What is your name? Could you give us your name? Yes. Let me just fix this. I'll be without a mic for a moment. I'm the Reverend Dr. Jodi Cohen Hayashida. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. I served in the town of Auburn for slightly more than 2 decades. My current work is organizing a statewide movement called Multi-Faith Justice Maine. And our goal is to bring together people of faith across the spectrum of faith traditions to build power together so that we can advocate for and work towards the creation of a radically loving society. An important piece of that work, though not the only piece of that work, is providing... All right, is that better? Yes, thank you so much. Is providing a faith-based alternative to white Christian nationalism. So today, we're going to spend some time together exploring what white Christian nationalism is, what white Christian nationalism is not, and then also spend some time talking about alternative visions and ways of being together in the world as people of faith, okay? I should name up front that this is a complicated and nuanced topic. White Christian nationalists have been intentionally and strategically organizing for more than 4 decades. So we are not going to be able to cover even a fraction of it in the hour that we have together. So we will do the best we can to do a very quick overview of the topic. For those of you who have the handout, on the back of that handout are a number of different resources that include both books and online resources. The Maine Council of Churches has an incredible array of resources on their website. There are some other groups. If you don't have the handout, I apologize that I did not print out enough. I'm going to send Dick the link to the handout, and I believe you will have both additional printed copies at a future point, but also you can just have the link. So you can just get it whenever you want, okay? And if you have questions that I can't answer, we'll put them in what we call the parking lot, which means we're not going to talk about it today, but if I have your email, I'd be happy to talk with you about it later. Okay, so first, let's talk about the term white Christian nationalism. How many of you have ever heard that phrase before? Anyone not heard that phrase before? Okay, so a few of us haven't heard it. Many of us have come across that phrase before, right? It's important that we give the things that we are countering a name. Theologian Drew Straight says it is impossible to resist something unless you can name the objects of your resistance. So we have named the object of our resistance, white Christian nationalism. It is important to know, however, that that is an outsider term. People who we might identify as white Christian nationalists are almost certainly not going to identify themselves as white Christian nationalists. They may, in fact, not even be familiar with the term, right? And if they are familiar with it, it's probably insulting. Many of the people that we would call white Christian nationalists would say of themselves, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a patriot, I love my country, I am deeply committed to my faith, I don't see what's wrong with trying to shape this country in accordance with my deepest values. That's what we do together. Okay? And that's the end of it, right? We understand white Christian nationalism to be more than that, to be more than simply being a Christian who loves your country. And we're going to get into some of the complexity around people immersed in white Christian nationalism who hold that fairly gentle view versus the actual intent of white Christian nationalism as a movement. So let me share with you a definition of white Christian nationalism. This comes from Faithful America. It was put together based on the research of a number of sociologists, academic researchers. Christian nationalism is a political ideology and a cultural framework that claims America was founded to be a Christian nation where Christians should receive special legal treatment not available to non-Christians. So let me repeat that one more time for those of you who don't have the handout. Christian nationalism is a political ideology and a cultural framework that claims America was founded to be a Christian nation where Christians should receive special legal treatment not available to non-Christians. So let's sit with that for a second and pull out the important pieces of that definition. Who would be willing to name one important piece of that definition? And I'm going to repeat everything you say into the microphone for the folks who are watching the live stream so they can hear it. The country was founded as a Christian nation, historically disputed, but nevertheless believed by many.
That Christian nationalism is a political ideology.
It is a political ideology.
I think the piece that's missing is that the intent is usually this is a Protestant Christian nation. I don't see Catholics and Orthodox.
Who gets to decide who's a Christian, right? According to this definition, most of you, frankly, are not Christian. Yes?
We were not founded as a Christian nation.
We were not founded as a Christian nation, right? Part of this movement is a retelling of history, or a cherry picking, and expanding on what fits well.
And non-Christians are excluded
Non-Christians are excluded.
from special treatment.
Special. Legally, if you are not a Christian, and more specifically, not the right kind of Christian, then you are not supposed to have the same rights as everyone else. And we saw that. The marriage equality fight was referenced in the worship service, right? We saw that in the marriage equality fight, where the fight for literally exactly the same rights, just basic rights, were framed as special rights, right? Because if you're the right kind of Christian and you're supposed to be getting things that other people don't have, then if they get it, it's special. It's not the same, right? It's a very intentional creation of inequality. Anyone else? Yeah, so I'm going to overlay one other piece to this. Sometimes out in the wild, we might hear Christian nationalism and then white Christian nationalism, with the implication that they are two different things. There is no such thing as Christian nationalism as a political movement that is not white Christian nationalism, which means overlaid with a political movement to incorporate white supremacy into the laws and structures of this country. So, for example, there are Black Protestant congregations who may believe that this country was founded as a Christian nation and could continue to be a Christian nation. They are not part of the Christian nationalist movement because it is a white Christian nationalist movement. This understanding of Christianity explicitly elevates white people. Were you about to raise your hand? Have I ever met a white Christian nationalist? Yes. Yes, I have.
I think just the implication of saying a white Christian nationalist.
Yeah.
And when I was just thinking about this, but first of all, then that kind of negates the Christian part. If you're just saying white Christian, that doesn't make any sense to me because Christians don't, we don't agree with white, black, it's like everyone is equal, created equal. And also, I wish we had a white Christian nationalist here so we could hear right from them what they believe.
So let me repeat for people, and tell me if you think I'm capturing this correctly. The first question was, have I ever met white Christians? And the answer to that is yes. And then just lifting up the fact that the definition of white Christian nationalism, along with its political and social goals, does not in fact fit within the framework of Christianity as a faith tradition.
Yes, exactly.
And that is, if you walk away with nothing else, that will be the most important point that you hear today. White Christian nationalism is a political movement that co-opted the language, the imagery, and some of the traditions of the Christian faith. It is not a religious movement. It started with a group of people who were seeking power, who basically said, hey, you know what? If we wrap our political agenda within the language of Christianity, then when anyone tries to push back on us, we can say, well, you're trying to oppress our freedom to practice our faith tradition. That is an oversimplification of 4 decades of history. So please, if you're interested in the history, feel free to do deeper research and gather a more nuanced understanding. But for our purposes today, it is important to understand that it is explicitly not a religious movement. It is a political movement. But this is where it gets complicated. Wait 1 second, and then I'll get to both of you. Where it gets complicated is that it is a political and cultural movement that was started by a group of people looking for political and social power, who moved it through the Christian network, and therefore, over the last 4 decades, has become integrated also into the world of religious Christianity. So there are many people who attend their Christian church and hear their pastor preach what we would call white Christian nationalism, the political agenda, framed in theological language. And they are people who say, I just really want to be a good Christian. My pastor is telling me that being a good Christian means, for example, women should obey their husband. One house, one vote. The husband and wife can talk about it, but at the end of the day, the husband gets to decide. That's part of the white Christian national agenda. And there are pastors who are preaching it to their congregations, and there are congregants who are hearing that thinking, I just want to be a good follower of Christ. And this is how my pastor is telling me to do it, right? So we've got the political movement, which is not religious at all, but then a lot of the adherents of the political movement, not the leaders, but the adherents of the political movements are in fact people who just want to be good Christians and patriots. And this is why it is complicated to know how to respond to the white Christian nationalist movement. Because to a significant extent, these are our kin, right? I mean, they are our kin anyway, because we are all kin. But theologically and religiously, we know that hunger to be faithful in this broken world, right? And we honor it, which is actually going to be a strength for us. So we had 2 questions. Let's get to those, or maybe 3 now.
Yeah, so I was just more going to say that in response to like, have we met Christian nationalists? I think it's really easy to think that you haven't, but like we all interact with these people every day.
Yeah.
And most of them don't, like you said, don't self-identify using that term. Like nobody's going to come out and say, I'm a white nationalist, I'm a white supremacist. Those are really rare.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
people all over the place are subscribing to this ideology.
That's right. And you had it. Go ahead.
It can feel to me when I use the term, well, I wonder if it's actually more accurate to say white male national Christian, accepted that women may have a voice, but they don't have a vote.
So let me just say that so the question is it more accurate to say white male Christian nationalism as a movement? Did you have more to say about that?
No.
Okay. Yeah. And this is one of the layers of nuance we don't have time to get into today. But yes, I mean, the intentional disempowerment, right? All of the gender dynamics, that is a very real part of this political movement. And as is often the case, women, white women, support what is ultimately not good for us. We are always, yeah. So that's another layer. If you're interested, there's lots of research about it. We can't get into it today, but that's a real dynamic. Oh,
Sorry. The other comment is, if I were to have a conversation with another Christian with whom I disagree,
yeah.
I might refer to them as a Pharisee and say it's entirely accurate. And I feel like if a white Christian nationalist does not refer to them in those terms,
Yeah.
is it fair for me to think of them in that way?
Such a good question. So again, make sure that I am summarizing this accurately for the live stream folks. If we use language like white Christian nationalist or Pharisee, but the people who we are talking about would not refer to themselves that way and do not think of themselves that way, is it fair for us to do so? So in this moment, I will say that we are living in dual realities, or we are living in a reality that has 2 aspects that exist in tension with each other. On the one side, we need to be able to clearly identify what the political movement of white Christian nationalism looks like in this country. And we need to be real with each other about the fact that it is a distortion of the Christian faith, that it is inflicting harm upon our kin, right? Like all of that is true. We need to be unflinching in the face of that reality.
What word did you use?
Unflinching, yes. In tension with that reality is the fact that as Christians and as people in general across the spectrum of faith or no faith who just want to make the world better, it usually doesn't work if we just come out swinging at each other. Which is why in the second part, we're going to talk about creating an alternative vision. Because we need to be real about what we're doing and real about the fact that if we actually want to create change, sometimes it's the fierce truth-telling, and more often, it's building relationship across lines of division and sitting in discomfort and reminding ourselves that we are called to love, as we heard this morning. We are called, like, the call to love is the ultimate call. Yeah. Okay, you, and then you, and then you. And then I'm going to get back to the information.
Mine can be a parking lot. They can go in the parking lot, that's fine.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm just glad to hear you say that, what you just said, because I feel like when you say something like white Christian nationalism, then we, in all of our minds, we can say, well, we just immediately discount that. It's like being a Trump supporter and being called a Nazi or a fascist. You don't ever have to listen to me again, because now I'm written off in your book as a Nazi and a fascist,
Yeah.
and a threat to democracy and every other thing you want to call me.
Yeah.
So by saying, oh, white Christian nationalists, we slam the door shut on even getting an inkling or a slight understanding of what's going on with these people. It sounds to me like they've labeled themselves and tied their approach to some very unpopular terms, and I don't see how they can get any traction.
Yeah.
And now we have no chance of understanding them because I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah. So just an affirmation that of that tension between us needing to be clear about the reality on the ground and the call as people of faith and how we actually connect. You all, I'm going to just take one more question for now and then move a little bit more deeply into this because I want to make sure we get through all of it. But I can stay as long as I need to afterwards. So if people have questions afterwards, we can keep talking. One more question for me.
Well, my question, it relates to what I just heard, although I could only half hear it. So
Yeah.
maybe wrong. But I find that many of my friends who consider themselves progressive, and I consider myself progressive, have a really hard time respecting viewpoints of people from this culture.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And so I'll say, well, maybe some women want a more traditional life for reasons that are not.
Yeah.
Or some people may really think that abortion is murder.
Yeah.
And I get the response from my friends, whoa.
Yeah.
They may think abortion is murder, but they may think it's abortion.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
But I think that if we start, I'm asking a question, if we start from the point of view that the other person is wrong, and yes, we're going to listen, but we don't really think we have anything valuable to say. Don't we? I wonder.
Yeah. So the question is, how are we holding the difference in belief morally and theologically and in terms of thinking of ourselves as change agents? If someone holds views that are radically different from our own, how do we choose to meet those views? With open-heartedness and the ability to simply be present, or more combativeness. This, I'm guessing you all do work around this just based on what I heard in worship this morning. I'm guessing that this is something that you explore on a regular basis. So I'm going to try to name this nuance quickly and then trust that y'all will continue to do the work together as a worshiping community. I'm a big fan of naming tensions, so I'm going to name another tension. For me, the politics of white Christian nationalism are actively and intentionally meant to cause harm, right? Like, these aren't abstract concepts. Some of these are literally a matter of life and death, survival or not survival for people. And myself, as a person of faith, who feels called to live out that faith in the world, I do not feel called to say, well, both of our viewpoints are legitimate and valid, we're allowed to think what we think, So let's have a conversation and just walk away both feeling great about it. Like, I don't need to have that conversation. I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with you enacting policies that are going to kill people that I love or people that I don't know. I don't think it's okay. So that is what I myself feel to be the calling of my faith. And again, there is the reality that we are not here really just talking about our feelings. We're here talking about how we are going to work together to shape the world into a more radically loving place, which is in part, how do we shape our own inner landscape? And that's a very complicated question. And sometimes it does mean saying, what you are saying to me, Jesus called you to do, feels to me in direct opposition to the teachings of Jesus. I do not recognize that as a manifestation of my faith. And sometimes we are called to sit in our own grief and our own pain. And frankly, that is in part a purely pragmatic decision. We've only got so many hours, we've only got so much energy, we only have so many conversations in us. So we have to pick and choose. And it's kind of gross to talk about that, especially in a church where, like, I'm used to talking about being faithful as opposed to successful, right? But we're talking about both. What does it look like to be successful as a person of faith? It's not the same thing as being successful in business. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make real change. And that's actually a lovely transition point. So I'm going to transition and talk a little bit about statistics. Only for a minute, I promise, but they're very helpful to hear, and they relate to what we just talked about. So, okay. So as far as I know, there has not been any statistical analysis of Maine. I've actually been talking with our research director at Maine People's Alliance, under whose auspices I'm organizing Multi-Faith Justice Maine, about whether or not he can do that type of analysis. He basically said, I don't really know how to do that right now, but it's a goal of ours to be able to figure out the landscape in Maine. But nationally, a 2022 Pew Research poll found that 45% of Americans believe the United States should be a Christian nation. According to sociologist Dr. Andrew Whitehead, and you have a couple of his books on your handout, the number is higher, it's 52%. But, and this is the important piece, that 45 to 52% exist across a spectrum of intensity of belief. In 2023, the Public Religious Research Institute, PRRI, found that just 10% of Americans are Christian nationalist adherents. An additional 19% are sympathizers, so maybe like I'm a Christian and I'm a patriot. It seems fine, but they don't necessarily know all of the nuance about how harmful it is, so like they're sympathizers. 39% are skeptics. They might be able to be convinced that Christian nationalism is the way, but that's not where they are right now. 29% are outright rejectors. Absolutely not. That's not who we are. It's not who we should be. There are other people who have developed slightly different statistics, but they're within the ballpark. So here's the important piece for us as people of faith who are also trying to make change in the world. When we focus our energy on countering the political movement of white Christian nationalism, we want to focus our energy on the 32% who are accommodators or the 39% who are skeptics, and equip them and support them, and then connect the resistors and the rejectors. Right? So this goes back to the practicality of deciding where we're going to focus our energies. As people of faith, it makes sense for us to sit down with someone who is diametrically opposed to us, whose beliefs we believe are harmful, and to sit in loving faithfulness and be in relationship with each other. That's fine. That is, as a person of faith, a great thing to do, right? When we're talking about building our power together and organizing the ways we're going to use our power to counter white Christian nationalism, we have to be pragmatic. And so we focus our energy on that middle group. So here are the people who are hardcore, 100% that believe this, will die on this hill. Here are the people who are already absolutely no, great, thank you, but we also don't need to spend our energy on you. And here's this middle group who could be moved one way or the other. And that is the place where if we're going to sit down and have that hard conversation and be really vulnerable and allow our own selves to be wounded in the work of loving towards justice, that's the place where we do it. Because there's a possibility of change. And again, I hate talking about it this way because as a person of faith, it feels kind of gross, but it's also real, right? As we're trying to shape the world together. Any questions about that? Any one question about that? Okay.
Can I say something?
Please.
I'm kind of confused.
Yeah.
And I'm new to this community in this church, and so I apologize.
No, no.
Whatever I might say. But I'm very confused of this idea of if we were not using the word Christian nationalism or white Christian nationalism, it feels to me as someone who has grown up separating church and state, to be sitting in a church talking about politics and talking about a group of people that are wrong and we're right. Can you bridge that gap? Are we talking about political values? Are we talking about human values? What are we talking about?
So the question is, having grown up with a firm belief in the separation of church and state, isn't it a little weird for us to be talking in church about politics? And are we talking about political values or human values? Exactly. That's exactly right. The reason we have to talk about this in communities of faith in general, and Christian churches specifically, is because the white Christian nationalist political movement is a movement that is explicitly intended to breach the separation of church and state, and are using the language of the Christian faith and the call of the Christian faith to do so. Which means that in terms of creating an alternative narrative about what it means to be a person of faith in a country where we are all free to practice our faith, Christians need to be equipped to recognize the political movement that is attempting to breach that divide and push back against it. Because while I'm also working with Muslims and Baha'is and the Jewish community and the Hindu community and the earth-centered community and the agnostic community and the spiritual but not religious community, we can all show up, but at the end of the day, it is the voice of the Christian saying, this is not what my faith teaches me that matters most. Does that answer your question?
I think it's very complex.
Yes. Yes.
I think I'm struggling with that too. I have people, there are people I look in my family, I
Yeah.
have some much more theologically conservative nephews who I love.
Yes.
Is there a danger that we're using white Christian nationalism too far away? I mean, are we assuming that people that belong to the Southern Baptist Convention will all be white Christian nationalists? Which I think might be a mistake. But what are we saying?
Yeah. I don't think we should assume anything.
If people believe that women should not work, should we assume that they're white Christian nationalists or are we going too far?
Wow, you all are asking really good questions. I'm going to say again, I don't think we should assume anything. I think we need to trust our own relationships, trust what people are telling us, trust the lived experience of people who are being impacted by some of this, right? I mean, this goes back to there not being a statistical analysis of Maine. One of the reasons that analysis doesn't exist is precisely because we don't want to make assumptions that the most conservative church in Turner is white Christian nationalist. Maybe they're just conservative Christian, right? And it is also true that the white Christian nationalist political movement has been organizing for 40 years, and we cannot spend 40 years trying to identify every individual as white Christian nationalist or not. We have to provide an alternative vision now. And I'm going to, let me do a quick time check. Okay. I'm going to shift us into that creation of an alternative vision. Because as I said, it's important for us to understand the reality around us. And as many of you have touched on, at the end of the day, what will be most important is not that we become adept at standing in front of thousands of people saying this is what's bad and everyone who believes it is bad, but instead that we get adept at standing in front of people, whether it's 1,000 people or our beloved relative, and say, this is what I believe. This is what my faith calls me to do. And this is my vision of what a country that has a separation of church and state, in which we are all free to practice our religion, looks like. This is what I believe as a Christian we should be creating together. So before I get into the specifics of that, let me ask you. If you could shape the society, erase what exists now. If you could shape a society in which every person of faith or no faith was free to joyfully practice their faith, what would that look like for you? Socially, emotionally, culturally, politically, doesn't matter. Go ahead, just spit it out. Are we assuming that's not the case now? Yes, we are. I think we can fairly say that it has been proven it is not the case now. Yeah.
Can you say why it's not the case now?
Sure. Well, let's start with, let me give you a specific legislative example. One of our main legislators introduced a law this year, or that did not pass, that into every public school, a chaplain should be put. The school didn't have to have a guidance counselor, and the chaplain didn't have to have any specific training or meet any particular guidelines, right? And her goal was to get Christians into the schools so that children in crisis would go to them, and their only counseling would come out of this particular Christian standpoint. It didn't pass, but there also was no outrage. Now imagine if the imam in Lewiston had asked one of my fellow organizers, Mana, who was also a state senator, to introduce that legislation. How do you think it would be received? Yeah. The people at one of the mosques where I work closely are terrified to practice their faith in this country right now. They do not feel safe, ever. They do not feel safe wearing their religious garb. They do not feel safe speaking the language of their faith. They are afraid for their safety in this country. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. We're not going to have a discussion about Gaza. Jewish people don't feel safe in this country. Jewish people.
I know that's true. We have close Jewish friends, and they've told me that they get worried nowadays about
Yeah.
violence at the synagogue. Those synagogues and temples have guards.
Yeah.
No, there's definitely, and it's true in Europe too.
Yeah.
This is in Europe.
Yeah.
People are taking down the noise from their real folks.
Yeah.
I've heard personal stories that say French shocks with schools.
Yeah. Yep.
Because as a white person on that subject, he's saying, but it is also I could be targeted when I'm marching and I do that for the parade, which I Muslims, Christians, Jews, which I've done before.
Yeah.
That somebody is going to go after me for that.
Yeah. So for those of you who are listening, just affirmation of personal knowledge of people who are feeling afraid. The daughter of our local rabbi stopped wearing her Star of David to school.
I just think it's important to note on this subject is there's a big difference between what the legislative reality is, and there may not be a law against freedom of practice, but the cultural norms define how people feel about it. So if everybody in your community feels one way about one religion, then that's inherently going to make those cultural norms feel like people who are outside of that religious group, then maybe they're not safe or maybe they're not welcome. And so, yes, on the books, there's no law against being Muslim, but when you get dirty looks and you're worried about being assaulted in the streets, that's not freedom of religion in practice.
Right, right. Yeah. One more, okay. We'll have a few more questions and then one of you was supporting the other and having a question. Who had an actual question?
I wanted to answer your question because it seems like people haven't been answering your question, so I'll give you a very good example. As a young woman who is of an age of fertility, where I see these issues is the right to choose whatever I do with my body, whether that means to bear children or not. That infringes on my own lifestyle. I don't want somebody in Washington or somebody in Augusta telling me what I have a right to do with my own body.
Thank you. Okay, so let me say that. So reproductive health, the right to choose what we do with our own body, our childbearing age, that is a religious debate in this country, right? The argument against reproductive choice is a religious argument. It isn't a, it,
No, it's not. There's absolutely no basis in any religious tradition for that sort of argument. It's a philosophical position. It's a socioeconomic position. You will find nothing in Scripture about it. You will find nothing in the Quran about it.
okay, well,
It may be held by religious people, but that doesn't make it essentially a religious position. It makes it a social position held by people who happen to be religious.
and that is white Christian nationalism in a nutshell. So let me repeat what you just said. So I said that reproductive health was a religious discussion, and you corrected me that it's not actually a discussion that's found in religious texts. It is an argument that is made by people who are religious. And that is exactly what we're talking about, right? Co-opting the language of religion and religious arguments for a political gain. Thank you so much for that correction. That was really important. Yes, thank you.
I see in class every day. I teach ethics in Southern Maine Community College. We have Muslims, we have atheists. The only really religious people are the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. But nonetheless, the fact is that most people are assuming that there's a religious reason.
Yes.
And there isn't.
Thank you. And that is because so much of the conversation is shaped as a religious conversation, whether or not that is legitimate.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trying to tie into this, I find it very useful that the term Christian also moved into the term religious, because there is authoritarianism in all kinds of places around the world, grounded in what I would call religion, at least in quotes, including in China, where there were forced doctrine and of the ruling class.
Yes.
And you can have that any place. You have Turkey, you can have Islamic nationalism, you can
Yeah.
have in all the countries of the world. I am glad that we're focusing on the white Christian nationalism because every one of us practically, I think, virtually everybody's white. I don't see how anybody's not white here. And so that speaks to us.
Yeah.
Christian, it speaks to us. And nationalism because it speaks to our nation.
Yeah.
But we do need to be aware that this is far broader, and I worry about Latino nationalism, Christian or not. I worry about black nationalism, Christian or not. And I think we maybe need to agree that we are somewhat limiting this discussion because that's who we are. It defines us.
Yes and no. So a whole bunch of good points were made that I'm going to try to quickly summarize. Apologies for cutting out your nuance. So authoritarianism around the world has been supported by religious traditions that are often not, in fact, Christian. So white Christian nationalism happens to be the American iteration, right? But in other countries, authoritarianism has been supported by Islam, Buddhism, which shocked me when I discovered that. So it can happen everywhere. So we're talking about our iteration. To your second point about why we're focusing on white Christian nationalism specifically, we don't have time to get into the nuance there, but I do want to name that while there are lots of people who could fall into lots of different categories who are after political power and want to be in power, in this country, it is white people, because of our systemic racism and white supremacy that are part of the foundations of this country. It is white people, and white Christians specifically, who are the power holders, right? Like if you broke down the country into power holders, they would be at the top. It doesn't mean that no one else wants it or would take it if they could. It just means our current reality is that those are the folks who have it and are fighting for more of it. I'm going to go back to our question about what kind of world would you try to create and what would it look like?
This may not be as specific as you wish, but a world I would create would be one in which we take our statements, which are very easy to come up with, very easy to pronounce, and turn them into questions. One of my favorite statements, which I have used with people of some conservative bent, and I think I maybe got it from you last night when you came to another meeting I attended, was, well, Jesus wasn't white, Jesus wasn't Christian, Jesus wasn't American. So how does this fit together?
Yeah.
And if I just make the statement, it just says, I'm right, you're wrong. Defend yourself. If I can turn it into a question.
So beautiful. So what would happen if
And I
we...
didn't make that up. I heard it from somebody who might be able to.
Yes, so what would happen if, in short, we moved away from statements of certainty and moved towards questions? How would that change the way we relate together and what we can create together? Ha! I just rhymed. Anyone else?
It's dialogue.
Dialogue. What would it look like if we created a world in which everyone could practice their own faith, everyone was considered equally beloved, equally worthy? I'm going to narrow it down. I keep saying in the world, but let's be more specific. We live in the richest nation in the history of the world. What would it look like if we, in this richest nation in the history of the world, created a society where we operate?
Personal safety would be the expectation or the norm.
Personal safety would be the norm for all of us. we would all be able to move through our days without fear.
Also, we would all live by the same laws, legally,
We would all live by the same laws. Can you say more about that?
and not seek, no group should seek to change the laws so it applies to them and not someone else.
No group seeking to change the laws so it applies to them and not someone else, or vice versa.
Everyone should have a chance to freely vote. Their vote should count, and they should be able to get representation in our government legislature.
Everyone should be able to freely vote, their votes count, and everyone is represented in our legislature.
I think you just described the country. I think what Sam is saying, personal safety, I agree with that, but we all have to be Christians and human beings. We're just human beings. We're not and in this country, we have two black people on the Supreme Court. We have black parents, black lawyers, black, Hispanic, Hindu. We have every single kind of person you can imagine that is free to rise up and face those issues. And I know that it's easy to just say, well, you're a victim of this or a victim of like systemic racism, and frankly, I don't believe in that. I think that there are situations that all people are in different states of being in unfortunate situations, black, white, it doesn't matter. It happens in Appalachia. Those are all poor white people that have
Yeah.
nothing, and we never hear about them. And it's just like, to me, it just seems so divisive, and it would be so wonderful if we can just all, look for what Sam was saying. Like just have, and not have to say it's white or it's black. I just don't see the value in it, honestly.
So a question about, isn't what we're saying already a reflection? Thank you. A reflection of this country as it exists now, and simply a manifestation of the fact that we're not perfect humans. And therefore, it's not realistic to expect that we'll feel safe in this world because we're imperfect. Isn't the issue not systemic oppression, but because there are people across the spectrum who struggle and who suffer, and some nevertheless who succeed. And I'm going to push back on that a little bit, especially that last piece about systemic oppression. To oversimplify what you're saying to make a point. So this is not a reflection of what we just heard. This is an oversimplification. The statement about pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right?
That's not what I said.
Right, that's why I said it's an oversimplification, right? If there are people across the board who are struggling, can't we all just commit to working hard? Is there really a systemic issue that keeps people down? This has been well studied. The reality is, in this country, there have always been systems of oppression. Systemic racism is real. And the way the impact of those systems snowball or are not erased as we change those systems is something that we need to take seriously, right? I wish it was as simple as hoping that we could all become more perfected through worship or whatever it is. But we create systems to help us live together, right? And those systems reflect our imperfections and amplify them. So the systems at the root of this country were created by racist, white, wealthy men. And so our systems are fundamentally, at their essence, racist, classist, and misogynistic. And we can work to change those systems, and there are people who find a way to survive and even thrive within those systems. But it doesn't mean the systems are real, and it doesn't mean we should let those systems stand.
I think the Episcopal Church has tried to address that issue through Sacred Ground, which is an excellent course about racism and people of Caucasian.
So there's an Episcopal program called Sacred Ground, which addresses systemic racism. Excellent, thank you. Yes?
There's I lived in Summit, I didn't live in Summit, New Jersey, but I attended church in Summit, New Jersey before I moved here. And there was a community program then there on racism, on understanding racism. Not many people from my church signed up for it, but I was among those who did. And it put different people from different churches and or synagogues or no church who felt like coming to it, and we had to listen to each other. And it gave, I want to say I am all for black rights, but I didn't have many black friends. And so to sit down and hear people say what it is like for them as a black person to work in what has been a mainly white corporation, and how alone they feel, that was really different for me, or how a black kid might feel in school. Or how you might feel being a nurse at a hospital when you're black and nobody in your family has gone to college before and gotten a nursing degree, and what it's like being around mostly white people. I didn't know much about what it's like to be in a minority position, and it was really very educational for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and this gets at what many of you have been mentioning, which is that we live in a time of deep dehumanization. And how do we do this work without participating in the dehumanizing of others, and instead find ways to rehumanize without giving up our own humanity, right? Because there are probably those among us in this room who have been dehumanized, right? And so what does that look like, right? We have different levels of risk. We have just a few more minutes. So I am going to shift into telling you quickly what Multi-Faith Justice Maine, that's the group that I organize, is doing in the next 6 months or so to counter white Christian nationalism. In your handouts, there is also a list of possible strategies that comes from the Kairos Center, which is out of New York. They did a whole guide on how to organize against white Christian nationalism that is rooted in experiences of groups around the country who are doing this work. So what did work, what didn't work, what their lessons are. So there are some strategies in your handout along with the link to that guide, so you can do further research. Multi-Faith Justice Maine has chosen to focus, as we talked about, on the creation of an alternative vision as our priority. So doing this kind of educating, helping people to be able to identify the concrete characteristics of white Christian nationalism and how it's shown up in the country, but also helping to shape the conversation around what we could create instead. So our goal through the end of this upcoming legislative session, at which point we'll have a new goal, is to create leadership teams around the state. They can be congregational based, so if there are some of you in this congregation who wanted to create a team, great. If there's some of you who wanted to work with other communities in the Portland area, great. So create leadership teams who are more deeply trained to be able to facilitate conversations around the state, and build out what we might call our circle of power. So people who are interested in working together to create this world that we want. And part of the work that those teams will take up is what's called an in-district meeting. So in Maine, we are very lucky that our legislators are citizen legislators, right? They are the people who live with us, work with us, we know them, they listen to us to a very unusual degree compared to many other places in the state. And an in-district meeting is literally getting 5 or so people together, reaching out to your local legislator and saying, would you please have a conversation with us? They often say yes. They have very busy schedules at various times, and so timing is important. But we would like to have teams across the state who sit down with their legislators and say, I am a person of faith, and these teams ideally are multi-faith. That's not always going to be possible depending on where in the state, but ideally multi-faith. I'm a person of faith, this is my faith tradition. I'm a person of faith, this is my faith tradition, blah, blah, blah. So first of all, embodying the reality that we are a multi-faith nation and we are a multi-faith state. Doing a little bit of educating about white Christian nationalism. This is what it looks like, this is how it has been organized, this is how it is showing up in Maine legislation. We didn't actually have time to get much into it, but it has been showing up very clearly in legislation. So walking the legislator through why this has a white Christian nationalist political agenda, and then naming very clearly, as a person of faith, this kind of legislation keeps me and other Mainers from living our faith freely, and asking them for a commitment to counter it. And then at some point during the session, we're going to have a celebration of faith at the State House, which will include representatives of as many different faith traditions as we can have. It will be a joyful celebration that honors the beauty and the diversity and the power and the grounding of faith traditions. And our goal is to pack the State House and invite legislators to attend. It'll be during the session, so they'll pop in for 3 minutes and then leave again, but that's okay. The goal is to lift up the beauty of who we are collectively and help legislators to understand that a lot of the rhetoric they are getting from white Christian nationalists about this is the way we should be legislating faith does not reflect what many of us hope for the world. So that's our very simple 6-month plan. It's like a launch of a plan, and then once we have experimented during this session, we'll get a little deeper, a little more nuanced, and a little more expansive as we build out our power. Any questions about that plan? You had a question.
You've answered it.
Oh, great. Okay.
One thing that might help our understanding would be if you could summarize in a few sentences or a paragraph, what exactly is the political goal of white nationalism, or white Christian nationalism?
What is the political goal of white Christian nationalism in a couple of sentences?
I can do it in 1 word.
Okay. That feels surprisingly hard to me. I think part of it is that there are a lot of folks who fall under that umbrella. So even people that we might call white Christian nationalists are not all going to agree with each other. I would say, if you look at Project 2025, if you look that up, that is the white Christian nationalist political agenda. It involves the deprioritization and active oppression of anyone who is not white, anyone who is not male, anyone who is not straight, anyone who is not Christian, anyone who is not born in the United States. So,
So it's more or less correct to say that white Christian nationalism is not so much itself a political movement as it is the co-opting of Christian trappings.
White Christian nationalism is not so much in itself a political movement as it is the co-opting of Christian language and symbolism to promote a right-wing political agenda.
yes. Yes, it is a political movement that has co-opted the language of Christianity and the trappings of Christianity as a way of increasing its power and acceptability in the country. Yes. One other thing I didn't say about Project 2025 is if you're not rich, it also doesn't support you. Yeah.
What did you say about it?
If it's, I excluded the fact that it's also a very classist document. So it elevates those who are wealthy.
Sounds like a trumpet mistake.
Well, I mean, there's a reason, right? I mean, there's a very close relationship, and we see, in fact, that a lot of the policies are directly from 2025, right? But whether or not, I mean, that's a very complicated, yes. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciated your thoughts. Thank you.
I don't mean to break it up. I did want to recognize our appreciation because we're coming down here from the R Sunday morning. She has family also, so, you know, they're missing her presence. So all I'm saying is thank you very much for being here this morning, and please accept this gift.
You're so sweet. Thank you. That is lovely. Yes, we are past our time. So thank you all for being here. If you didn't sign somewhere, there's a clipboard. If you haven't signed it, please sign it. It will allow me to stay in touch with you. Glad you were all here. Thank you. It's on the piano. Thank you.